Evelyn Harper had grown used to silence, but that morning it felt heavier than usual. The rain tapped softly against the kitchen window, while steam rose from a single cup of coffee resting on the table. For years, she had prepared 2 cups without thinking, one for herself and one for her husband, Michael. Even after 2 years of living alone, the habit sometimes returned before reality caught up. She stood still for a moment, staring at the empty chair across from her, then gently moved the second mug back into the cupboard. Life had continued moving forward, but she often felt as if hers had quietly paused. At 52, Evelyn lived in a peaceful neighborhood outside Portland, surrounded by tidy lawns and familiar streets. Neighbors waved politely. Delivery trucks came and went, and seasons changed exactly as they always had. Yet inside her home, time felt different. Photographs lined the hallway, family vacations, birthdays, anniversaries, each one holding a version of her that seemed brighter and more certain. She avoided looking at them too long because they reminded her of how much had changed. Her son Daniel called often, but work kept him busy in Seattle. He had always been creative, always chasing ideas. As a child, he photographed clouds with a cheap camera and insisted every picture told a story. Now, at 26, photography had become his career. Evelyn admired his passion, though she rarely understood how he saw beauty in ordinary moments. That Saturday afternoon, the quiet broke when the front door opened and Daniel stepped inside carrying a camera bag. Rain dotted his jacket, and his familiar smile instantly warmed the room. "Mom," he said, setting the bag down, "I need your help." Evelyn laughed softly. "That sounds serious." "It is," he replied. "I'm working on a portrait project, and I need someone real. No models, just honest emotion." She raised an eyebrow. "And you chose me." "Of course," he said without hesitation. "You're perfect for it." The idea made her uncomfortable. She hadn't liked being photographed since Michael passed away. Cameras felt too honest, too revealing. They captured emotions she worked hard to keep hidden. "I don't think I'm what you're looking for," she said gently. Daniel shook his head. "You don't see what other people see." His words lingered longer than she expected. There was sincerity in his voice, not pity. After a moment of hesitation, she agreed, mostly because she missed spending time with him. They began in the backyard garden, a place filled with memories. Michael had planted roses there years earlier, and despite everything, Evelyn still cared for them. Autumn leaves covered the grass, glowing gold beneath a cloudy sky. Daniel adjusted his camera and asked her to walk naturally, not posing, not trying to look perfect. "Just be yourself," he said. At first she felt awkward, unsure where to look or how to stand. She folded her arms, then unfolded them, laughing nervously. Daniel didn't rush her. Instead, he asked simple questions about her childhood, about favorite songs, about the first trip she and Michael took together. As she answered, something shifted. She stopped thinking about the camera and started remembering moments she hadn't spoken about in years. She described dancing in the kitchen with Michael while dinner burned on the stove, getting lost on a road trip, and laughing instead of arguing. And the way he always believed she was stronger than she felt. The camera clicked quietly again and again. Her laughter came naturally at one memory, and tears filled her eyes at another. Daniel never interrupted. He let emotions exist without trying to fix them. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt safe expressing feelings she usually kept hidden. Hours passed without her noticing. When they finished, she felt strangely lighter, as if speaking aloud had released something she'd been carrying alone. Inside the house, Daniel transferred the photos onto his laptop while she waited nervously beside him. "I probably look tired," she said, preparing herself for disappointment. The first image appeared on the screen. Evelyn leaned closer, confused. The woman in the photograph looked calm and thoughtful. Fine lines framed her eyes, but they didn't make her look old. They made her look experienced, kind, real. The sadness she expected to see wasn't overwhelming. Instead, there was quiet strength. "That can't be me," she whispered. Daniel smiled softly. "It is." She studied the image again. She wasn't posing or trying to impress anyone. She was simply existing, and somehow that looked beautiful. Emotion rose in her chest unexpectedly, and tears slipped down her cheeks. "I forgot I looked like this," she said. For years she had seen only loss when she looked at herself. Through Daniel's camera, she saw survival. He continued showing more photos. One captured her laughing in the garden. Another showed her staring thoughtfully toward the sky. Each image felt honest, almost intimate, yet respectful. She began to understand what Daniel meant about emotion telling a story. Then he said something that surprised her. "I want to submit these to a gallery exhibition." She turned sharply. "No, absolutely not." "Why?" "Because strangers will see them," she replied quickly. Daniel nodded. "That's the point. These photos aren't about appearance. They're about connection." The idea terrified her. Being seen by strangers felt vulnerable, almost frightening. But Daniel didn't pressure her immediately. Over the next few days, he spoke about how art helped people feel understood, how honest stories mattered. Slowly, her resistance softened. Part of her wondered what it might feel like to step outside the safety of hiding. Eventually, she agreed. The gallery opened on a cool evening downtown. Warm lights glowed through large windows, and soft music drifted into the street. Evelyn hesitated at the entrance, gripping her coat tightly. "I can't do this," she whispered. Daniel smiled reassuringly. "You already did the hard part." Inside, people moved quietly from photograph to photograph. Conversations were gentle, thoughtful. When Evelyn saw her portraits displayed on the wall, her heart raced. For a moment she wanted to leave, but then she noticed something unexpected. People weren't judging. They were studying the images carefully, almost respectfully. One woman stood in front of a portrait with tears in her eyes. A couple spoke softly about how the photograph reminded them of resilience after loss. No one knew Evelyn personally, yet they connected with her emotions. She felt something shift deep inside her, a sense of belonging she hadn't felt since Michael's passing. A stranger approached her without realizing she was the subject of the photos and said, "Whoever this woman is, she looks strong, like she's been through something and kept going." Evelyn swallowed hard. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. As the evening continued, she relaxed enough to enjoy the atmosphere. Daniel moved quietly through the room, occasionally taking candid shots of visitors. He watched her more than anything else, observing how she slowly opened up, how her posture changed, how she smiled more naturally. Then a man stopped in front of one portrait and stayed there longer than anyone else. He studied the photograph carefully, hands in his coat pockets, expression thoughtful. After a moment, he turned toward Evelyn. "I hope this doesn't sound strange," he said kindly, "but this photo made me feel hopeful." She blinked in surprise. "My wife passed away a few years ago," he continued gently. "Seeing this, it reminded me that life doesn't end with grief." There was no awkwardness in his tone, only honesty. He introduced himself as Robert Hayes, and they began talking easily. Conversation flowed without effort, about art, about rebuilding routines after loss, about learning to live again. Evelyn found herself laughing softly, something she hadn't done with a stranger in a long time. Across the room, Daniel watched quietly, lowering his camera with a small, satisfied smile. He saw color returning to his mother's expression, warmth replacing the guarded sadness she had carried for so long. Evelyn didn't notice his reaction. She was too busy feeling something new, a gentle spark of possibility she hadn't expected when she agreed to be photographed. As the gallery lights glowed around her and conversation continued, she realized the evening had already changed something inside her. The photographs had shown her a version of herself she thought was gone. And meeting Robert felt like the beginning of a chapter she never imagined reopening. What she didn't yet understand was that Daniel had hoped for this all along. And as the night went on, the project that started with a simple camera quietly became the moment that began bringing her back to life. After the gallery night, Evelyn Harper returned home carrying a feeling she could not easily explain. The house looked the same furniture, the same photographs, the same quiet rooms, yet something inside her felt lighter. She caught herself smiling while placing her coat on the chair, replaying moments from the evening in her mind. Robert's calm voice, his gentle humor, and the way he listened without rushing stayed with her longer than she expected. She told herself it was only a pleasant conversation, nothing more, but the warmth followed her into the next morning. Days passed, and she noticed small changes in her routine. She opened the curtains earlier, letting sunlight fill the kitchen. Music played softly while she prepared breakfast. For the first time in years, she cared about choosing what to wear before going out. These were simple things, yet they felt new. Grief had once made every day predictable and heavy, but now curiosity quietly returned. She wondered if Robert would visit the gallery again, or if their meeting had simply been a brief crossing of paths meant to fade. Daniel called midweek, his tone casual but curious. He asked about her day, her garden, and finally the exhibition. Evelyn tried to sound calm when she mentioned Robert, but Daniel immediately noticed the change in her voice. He didn't tease her. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions, encouraging her to talk about how the evening made her feel, rather than focusing on the man himself. By the end of the call, Evelyn realized she had spoken more openly than she had in months. When she hung up, she suspected her son understood more than she said aloud. The following weekend, Daniel arrived again with his camera and 2 cups of coffee. He suggested continuing the photography project, explaining he wanted to capture movement and energy in city settings. Evelyn agreed without much hesitation. The first session had helped her see herself differently, and she trusted him now. They drove downtown where streets buzzed with weekend activity. Musicians playing near cafes, couples walking dogs, and children laughing near fountains. The lively atmosphere felt unfamiliar yet refreshing. Daniel photographed her walking along sidewalks, stopping near shop windows, and watching people pass by. He encouraged her to interact naturally with her surroundings. At first she felt self-conscious again, but the rhythm of the city distracted her. She found herself enjoying the moment instead of worrying about the camera. Daniel occasionally lowered the lens to talk with her, asking questions about dreams she once had but never pursued. She admitted she had always wanted to travel more, to take painting classes, and to meet new people after retirement. Plans she postponed while caring for Michael during his illness. Hearing herself speak about the future surprised her. For so long she avoided imagining anything beyond the present day. Daniel listened carefully, nodding as if each word confirmed something important. Eventually they walked toward a quiet park filled with autumn trees glowing in warm colors. Evelyn slowed her steps, breathing deeply, feeling calm. Then she noticed someone sitting on a nearby bench holding 2 takeaway coffees. Robert, she stopped instantly. Confusion and embarrassment mixing together. He stood up with a friendly smile, clearly expecting her arrival. Evelyn turned toward Daniel, realization forming quickly. "You knew he'd be here," she said. Daniel tried to look innocent but failed. "I might have mentioned we were coming." For a brief moment she considered being upset, but Robert's gentle expression softened her reaction. There was nothing forced or uncomfortable about the situation. Instead, it felt oddly natural, like meeting an old friend again. Robert handed her one of the coffees. "I hope this isn't awkward," he said. "I enjoyed talking with you the other night." Evelyn accepted the drink, smiling despite herself. "It's unexpected." They began walking together through the park while Daniel photographed from a distance. Conversation resumed easily, picking up where it had ended at the gallery. Robert spoke about his work restoring public parks and how helping communities rebuild spaces gave him purpose after losing his wife. Evelyn shared stories about teaching part-time at a local library years earlier, and how she missed interacting with people daily. There was comfort in their honesty. Neither tried to impress the other. They simply spoke as to people who understood loss yet refused to let it define the rest of their lives. Evelyn noticed how relaxed she felt, how laughter came without effort. She realized she hadn't compared Robert to Michael once, not because she forgot her husband, but because this connection felt different, its own beginning rather than a replacement. After some time, Daniel approached and showed them the photos he had taken. One image caught Evelyn's attention immediately. She was mid-laugh, eyes bright, shoulders relaxed. Robert sat beside her, looking at her with quiet admiration. The picture felt alive, full of movement and warmth. "That's not the same woman from 2 months ago," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "Exactly." They sat together on a bench while sunlight filtered through the trees. Daniel's voice grew more serious. He explained that the photography project had never been only about art. He had worried about her loneliness, but didn't know how to help directly. Photography gave him a way to remind her of her own strength without pushing too hard. "I wanted you to see yourself the way the world sees you," he said gently. "Not just as someone who lost something, but as someone who still has so much life ahead." Evelyn felt tears forming again, but this time they carried gratitude instead of sadness. She realized how carefully Daniel had guided her, first helping her rediscover confidence, then encouraging her to step back into social spaces, and finally creating an opportunity for new connection without pressure. She hugged him tightly. "You didn't just take pictures," she said. "You helped me find myself again." Daniel smiled, clearly relieved. For him, the success of the project wasn't measured by exhibitions or praise, but by the change he saw in his mother's eyes. As evening approached, Daniel packed his camera and intentionally gave Evelyn and Robert time alone. They walked slowly along the path, discussing books, travel, and small plans for the coming weeks. Robert suggested visiting a local art fair together sometime. The invitation felt gentle, not demanding. Evelyn agreed, surprising herself with how natural the decision felt. Driving home later, she watched city lights blur past the window and reflected on the day. She still loved Michael deeply, and that love would always remain part of her story. But she understood now that moving forward did not erase the past. It honored it by continuing to live fully. Over the following weeks, Evelyn's life gradually filled with activity. She joined a community art class, met Robert for coffee walks, and even volunteered at a neighborhood reading program. Daniel visited often, sometimes photographing casually, sometimes simply spending time together. Each photo captured moments of growth rather than staged perfection. One evening, Daniel brought a framed photograph as a gift. It showed Evelyn and Robert walking through the park, engaged in conversation, unaware of the camera. The image felt natural and sincere, a snapshot of possibility rather than certainty. She placed the frame in her living room where morning sunlight touched it each day. Instead of reminding her of loss, the photograph symbolized change and healing. Visitors who saw it often commented on how happy she looked, and she no longer argued with them. Months later, Daniel submitted the completed project under the title Beginning Again. The collection told a quiet story of rediscovery, resilience, and connection. Viewers responded deeply, many sharing their own experiences of rebuilding life after difficult chapters. Evelyn attended the final exhibition not with nervousness, but with pride, standing beside her son. She realized the greatest gift he had given her was not confidence or companionship, but permission. Permission to feel joy again without guilt. As the evening ended, Robert joined them, and the three walked out together into the cool night air. Evelyn felt steady, hopeful, and present in a way she had not felt for years. Life had not returned to what it once was. Instead, it had grown into something new, and she finally understood the truth Daniel had seen from the start. Sometimes healing begins with something small, a camera, a conversation, a moment of being truly seen, and from that moment, an entirely new chapter quietly begins.